in their PJs and did story time in bed with both of them without any major incident. Tommy did do that thing where he wouldn't let go of her when it was time to turn the lights out. She didn't remember Molly going through the same phase, but boys were different. When she went back upstairs, she ran herself a hot bath and checked her email while it ran. There were a few of the usual updates from the different regional partners. She was almost done moving through the unread messages when her eye saw one from Bob. No one had heard from Jorge, and so he had called and left a message with his manager to give an update when he got back. What the fuck, Jorge? She thought, now beginning to wonder at the edge of her mind if the guy was okay. Without much more to do, at least, until the whole circus began again on Monday, she started up an audiobook on her phone and slipped into the bath. The water was hot, almost too hot, the kind of heat that dug into the muscles and bone. Karla could feel it in her feet and legs after the long plane ride and all the airport walking. She leaned her head back into the water, closing her eyes and letting her face rest just above the surface. It felt like she were being held by the warmth for a moment. The sound of the audiobook muted by her partial submersion. Almost weightless. Beneath it all, the buzzing hummed. When she had wrapped herself in a towel and returned to the bedroom, the lights were off and Frank was already in bed. Karla was surprised and a little hurt seeing him laying on the other side, under the covers. She thought of turning on the lights and confronting him, asking him what the hell has been so important that he couldn't come up and greet her after she came home. But the days of those kinds of fight were not in her anymore. She felt a little relieved, a sense of comfort seeing his outline under the blankets. She hated herself for that. Karla thought of doing something, anything then, to let him know, to show him and the world what she really felt. The fury rose up in her suddenly, like an iron ball caught in her throat, and she wanted to scream. Instead, she put on her nightgown and slipped into bed beside her husband. In the dark, under the covers, Karla felt the weight of him pulling down on the mattress. She felt his breathing, low and rumbly, like a distant thunderstorm, and she wondered if he was asleep. Trip. The voice came out of the dark, almost in response to Karla's unspoken question. It was so unexpected, she didn't know what to say. Trip? Had he just said, Trip? The trip, Frank said again, shifting slightly, but his back still turned. It was good? Yeah, she sighed. It was okay. My engineer didn't show up. I missed the kids. She waited for the question she hoped would come. And me? He would say, a little hurt. A little hurt because he still cared. He said nothing. Karla listened to his breathing again, felt the comforter and sheets rise up and down slowly, rhythmically. A gentle clicking like cicadas on a hot summer night. Something tapped at the window in the dark, maybe, and the breathing and droning softly. Her body felt heavy, and sleep rushed in to greet her before she was aware. Hands pushed against her body, running over her stomach and breasts. She was half awake in the dark, and Frank was behind her. His hands gripped at her, pulled at her chest and thighs. Karla could only feel in the pitch black, could feel her husband's rough hands, could feel the smell of him. The whole sense of it was beyond her anger from earlier. Instead, she felt hungry for the touch, the attention, any goddamn attention. To be seen, heard, felt. She pushed herself back against him hard, pulled his hand up to the side of her face and bit his thumb. Karla rolled her neck back, and he breathed into her ear, rhythmically, in tiny groaning bursts, and she thought again of cicadas and bees and hornets droning in their nests. A screaming from outside the bedroom woke her up, eyes wide, head launching from the pillow. Sunlight was coming through the window. She was late. The kids were already up, and she was late. The side of the bed next to her was empty, the pillows and sheets roughly thrown back into place. She heard another scream, recognizing it this time as a playful one, a happy one. Molly or Tommy in the kitchen. Karla wondered if Frank had already gotten up and started breakfast with the kids. standing in front of the stove with his boxers on, making scrambled eggs. But she didn't smell eggs when she opened the door. Molly and Tommy were in the kitchen at the table. Both had big bowls of cereal in front of them. Both were eating and laughing at some unspoken joke. They saw her, grinning ear to ear. A gallon of milk was sitting on the table between them, along with the box of cereal, both still open. Cereal and a big white splash of milk spread across the table, and especially around Tommy, splashes had fallen across the floor. It was clear they had gotten the cereal out themselves, along with the milk, and made their own bowls, spilling milk and cereal along the way. The whole kitchen was a mess. Karla saw the clock was already 15 after. Neither of them were dressed, and the kitchen was a disaster. It would take far too long to clean this, and the kids, and get them dressed, and ready for school. "Hi, Mommy," Tommy said, turning to her. Both of them had big, stupid grins spreading, dribbling cereal and milk out of their mouths with each little hyena laugh, snorting and dribbling, laughing at her, at this mess. "What happened in here?" Karla said, losing grip of her voice. "What the hell did you do? Why is this kitchen so messy? Why did you do this?" Their expressions changed, and she watched Tommy give Molly a nervous glance. It was Molly who spoke. "We were hungry, so we got some cereal out for ourselves. Aunt Becca showed us how to get the milk out and everything. We can do it ourselves," she said, proudly, defiantly. "No, no, no," Karla said, her voice raising. "If you are hungry and I'm not awake, you come and wake me up, okay? Do you understand?" Molly and Tommy exchanged looks, still smiling. Karla slapped her hand down on the table and both of them jumped a little. Smiles gone. "I am serious, super serious, you two. Wake me up next time. Or Dad. You do not get out the milk by yourselves. This is a mess. Do you understand?" She could hear the tension in her own voice now, and the warbly lower lip of Molly told her she'd gone too far. She was angry with both of them, and angry with Frank for slinking off again, to work, to wherever, to whomever. And she was angry with herself, and sad. The humming in her ears was present again, as Molly and Tommy both nodded sulkily, and she put the cap back on the milk and tucked it into the fridge. She got them both washed and dressed and out to the car in the next 30 minutes. Neither of them had spoken much since the incident at breakfast. Locking the door, Molly and Tommy ran ahead to the SUV in the driveway, and Karla almost had a moment of panic thinking about the owl. Molly, but Tommy, particularly at his age, were both sensitive to these sorts of things. To death. 2 years ago, their goldfish, Mr. Fish, had passed away without warning, and Molly had sobbed for weeks at the sight of the empty bowl. The owl wasn't there, not even a feather. Instead, both kids ran past none the wiser and into the car, while Karla wondered if something hadn't drug it off in the night. Or maybe she had misremembered. When she backed out onto the street, both kids in tow and buckled in safe, she spotted two of her neighbors down the street standing in their yard. Karla recognized Sam and Ginny Bollinger, the two most senior citizens on her street, and a pair as old and inseparable as Salt and Pepper. Neither seemed to notice her. Instead, they stood side by side, looking across the street and to the clouds above. Karla shifted gear and moved slowly down the lane. She and Frank had always gotten along well with the Bollingers. Sam had lent Frank his old toolbox on more than one occasion when they moved in, and before Molly and Tommy were born, with the cribs and rockers and other million things babies needed built for them. Ginny was leader of the women's group down at First Presbyterian, which neither Karla or Frank attended, but that had never stopped her from coming over with leftover cookies and snacks from the Sunday service for the kids. They were, in the classic sense of the word, good neighbors. As she approached them, she stopped and eased closer, rolling down her window. Both Sam and Ginny kept their eyes fixed on the sky. Sam's sage-like face furrowed in deep concentration at the clouds above them. "What do you think, Sam?" Karla said. "What did the weatherman say?" Sam nodded slowly. "Looks like rain today." Karla nodded in agreement, the only obvious thing to do. After a moment, when there was nothing more to be said, she told them she had to take the kids to school, and again Sam nodded wisely. In her rear view, she could see them, still standing in the same spot, still watching the sky. She slowed and looked to where they were facing and saw the dark gray clouds and brewing thunderstorm above. Rain, most likely this afternoon, she thought. It's Saturday. Karla realized this as the school came into view. The streets had been far too quiet, and that had been the first sign. No kids running around, no slow-moving traffic stopping every 20 feet for a family or kids to cross. Instead, it was almost empty in the little neighborhood. The parking lot of the school was totally vacant. The lights inside were off. Shit, Karla said. It's Saturday, Mom, Molly said from the back, looking out the window and stating the obvious. Did you know that when you got up? Karla asked, looking in the mirror. Her daughter nodded. Why didn't you say anything then? Molly jumped topics and said, I miss when Aunt Becca stayed with us last year. That was last week, baby, Karla corrected. Not last year. Molly smiled and shrugged and went back to the iPad in her lap. Tommy didn't look up from his. Karla looked at her phone, the day, the time. Then she thought about Frank again. She had assumed he had left for work, but if it was Saturday, then where the fuck was he? There was no work today, not even for a big-shot architect. Why was she out here alone with the kids? Karla called his cell phone. It rang for a minute and then went to voicemail. She called him again, but hung up this time after the fifth ring. Then she texted him, Where are you? Karla pulled up the location app the family all shared, the one she had installed on the kids' iPads and the one Frank had put on their cell phones years ago as part of their family plan. She scrolled through the devices, found Frank's smartwatch, and checked that. Dead battery and no known location. She pulled up his cell phone, and this time it was live. The tracking app showed his cell phone as pinging from the house. Mom, Tommy said from the back, where are we going? I want to go to the Triangle Park. Yes, Molly said gleefully. The Triangle Park, the Triangle Park. Karla let out a small breath, still looking at the location marked on her phone. Okay, she said. Let's go to the Triangle Park. They did. It was only a short drive away, one of 3 neighborhood parks, and with the overcast, no one else was there. This gave Karla time to check her work email, while Molly and Tommy played on the empty and oversized play structure. Nothing new had come in, but she had a few days of missed messages and a small crisis to respond to. She managed to notify the senders that she was back in office and would respond early next week. Mommy, look! Karla heard Tommy's voice. Mommy, look! Look at them! He was pointing to the little building beside the main play structure. It was a pyramid-shaped building made of wood and plastic. Clearly it was American or Chinese-made, based on the cheap materials, and the designer had no sense of taste, as the thing was done to look like a cross between an ancient Egyptian pyramid and a Native American teepee. Tommy led the way, and Karla observed the little eyes and owls and wolves and other symbols that had been pressed into the thing by the creator. Molly was already inside, looking upwards and pointing. The little doorway was made for children, and Karla had to stoop to get inside. It was dark in there, too, but Karla could hear them. Look at them, Mommy, Tommy said. Karla looked up toward the rafters 10 feet or so above them, already pulling out her phone and aiming the light towards it. When the light came on, 4 large eyes, glowing, stared back. There were 2 of them, eyes watching menacingly. Owls, Mommy, owls! Tommy was bouncing giddily. Molly watched silently. The rain tapped at the windshield and was pushed away again and again as they drove home. Wind had pushed in first, cold and wet, followed by the first few errant drops. Now it was falling in honest effort. They turned down the lane, the kids quiet since the park, when she saw them. The 2 were still there, standing, watching, when Karla pulled the car up next to them and put her window down. Jesus, Sam, she started, before the look on his face stopped her. Both of the Bollingers were standing exactly as she had left them before, unmoved and unchanged, except for they were now soaked through, their hair sogged and draped down, their clothes wet, heavy rags. Neither looked back at her. Ginny's face trembled, lips quivering as her eyes watched upwards into the clouds. Sam, are you guys okay? What is going on here? Karla asked, now thinking about the kids and if they should be here to see this. Looks like rain, Sam said vacantly. Karla realized then that neither of them was blinking, either, as they stared into the rain that slapped at their faces. Too important, the clouds, or whatever was in them, to care. Sam, Karla said again, now opening the door to her car and unbuckling to get out. As she did so, Ginny's old and withered eyes turned toward her and saw Karla for the first time. The lips that were trembling incoherently moments ago now turned to hard lines. Her face grimaced in pain and anger, as though she had just realized some great offense Karla had committed. The old woman opened her mouth wide, as if to shout at Karla, and the angry droning of 1,000,000 buzzing insects came out. The sound hummed and buzzed and pulsed in Karla's ears so loud it brought tears to her eyes, and as soon as it had started, it stopped. Ginny was again staring, silent, and closed-mouthed towards the storm. "I'm telling you, something is wrong, Becca," Karla said, sitting on her bed with her phone. "What do you mean she was screaming, though?" Rebecca asked, her voice a rasp. Karla had taken the kids back across the street and gotten them into a warm bath before calling Rebecca. She could hear them just down the hall and was popping in and out to check on them without letting them overhear her and Rebecca. "I mean Karla paused, unsure what to describe exactly. "They're just standing out there in the rain. They must have been out there for hours now." Karla heard the sound of someone blowing their nose on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry," Rebecca said. "I've got this stupid cold." "Well, are they still out there?" Karla went to the bedroom and looked out the window. She pulled the blinds back softly, trying to stay out of the light. Suddenly, feeling like a spy or a mobster in some thriller movie, the kind Frank used to make her watch when it was his turn for date night. Half expecting them to be looking right at her from across the street, Karla was still less than relieved when she saw them on the lawn, watching the sky as the rain pelted at their faces. The buzzing in Karla's ear a dull hum. "Yeah," she said, hearing Rebecca give another loud series of sneezes. "They're still out there. I don't know what to do." "Call social services," Rebecca said. "Tell them it's a code silver. Adult assistance. Do they have any children in the area you could call?" Karla looked back into the bathroom where Molly was blowing bubbles under the water with Tommy, before popping up and shouting, "Boo!" Then they would both start giggling furiously. Karla walked back down the hall. "Not that I know of, and I've got the kids in the bath now. I think they didn't have any children, or at least I haven't seen any come by." "I'll do it," Rebecca said, her voice a rasp. "I can get a hold of the guy at the hospital who handles these things and get a number to call. I'll text it to you in a minute." Karla held the phone down and looked out the window again. What were they looking at? Both of them, though? How does that happen? Karla said to herself. "What's that?" Rebecca asked. "Nothing," Karla said. "Look, don't worry about it. I'm going to call 911 and let them know. They'll send someone out. What? I feel like something happened, right? An old person going a bit funny is one thing, but both at the same time? You don't think something happened like what?" Rebecca asked. "Sometimes it happens. She could have been batty for a while, and maybe he was just holding it all together. Then he started slipping. That's what happened to my aunt and uncle." "Yeah," Karla said. "Anyways, let me call them. I'll call you back, okay?" The police dispatcher called her back after her initial call to let her know that they were sending an officer out. A short while later, Karla saw the cruiser coming down the street slowly. That's when Molly and Tommy needed help getting out of the bath into their PJs. Tommy began screaming from the bathroom, his voice like a shrill pitch of grasshoppers on a hot day, but faster and louder. It slapped Karla across the face. The operator asked if everything was okay, if that was the Bollingers. Karla told her she would call her back and hung up. She made her way down the hall, and her phone began to ring. The operator calling back because she had hung up. In the bathroom, Molly had taken a bowl from the kitchen. How it had gotten here was beyond her, and was dumping water on Tommy's head. The bathtub faucet was running. Karla could see the dial turning to cold, could see Molly's face filling up the bowl again, and realized what she had been doing and was about to do. The little girl's face was a twist of delight until she saw her mother coming toward her. Karla snatched her by her wrist and twisted the bowl free. "Ow, stop it!" Molly whined back at her. Karla threw the bowl across the little room. She was aiming for the far end of the countertop, the most reasonable place she could see, but overshot it, and the plastic bowl bounced and clattered to the floor. "What the hell are you doing?" Karla said, her voice on the edge of breaking. "Why would you do that to him?" Molly's face turned sour then, pouty, not sad, and stood there defiantly. Tommy continued to scream bloody murder, tears of pain and betrayal running down his face. The phone continued to ring. Endlessly, it rang and rang and rang, while Tommy screamed and looked up at Karla helpless. Karla remembered the Bollingers then, and the police officer, and heard the phone ringing. She looked from Tommy to Molly. "Stay here," she said, firm and angry like she was. "Do not touch your brother again. I am coming back in 1 minute to get you out." Then added, "Don't give me that attitude, Miss Molly, or I promise, so help me, you will not get dessert all week." Molly shot daggers with her eyes as she answered the phone and left to go back down to the window. The operator said nothing at first, as Karla came back to the window and peered through the blinds. There was breathing on the other end of the line, and a faint humming noise in the background. When she looked outside and across the street, she didn't see anything. The Bollingers were gone. So was the police car. The yard and house across from her, the entire street, looked as it always had. "Hello," the voice on the other end of the phone said. Karla felt her skin prickle a bit around the ear and down her neck. Was this the same operator? Had they switched shifts? "Hello," the voice said again, and this time there was a little clicking noise, like the person on the other end was tapping their tongue against the roof of their mouth. "Hello, miss?" the voice said one more time after Karla didn't say anything. She was still too preoccupied with the Bollingers' house and the scene on the front lawn that had seemingly evaporated. "Yes," Karla said, "I'm here." "Is everything okay, miss?" the voice asked. "Has the situation been resolved?" Karla paused, wondering who it was she was talking to. "Yes," she said. I think it has. Did the officer talk to them? Are they okay?" "Who, miss?" the voice asked. Karla heard Tommy scream again, this time with renewed earnest, and beneath that she could hear the water running slowly, whining in the old pipes as it splish-splashed into the bath. "The Bollingers," Karla said, now a little annoyed. "The people I called about? My neighbors?" There was a pause on the other end this time. The water in the bathroom began to run faster. "I don't know what you're talking about, miss," the voice said. "I'm sorry, but you'll have to call back at another time." "What?" Karla said, taking a final look out the window at the empty street. "Miss, are you okay?" the voice asked again. "Miss, are you okay, miss? Do you know where your husband is, Karla?" Karla froze, mid-step to the bathroom. Tommy's screams filled the hallway, and Karla was wondering now why the operator had never asked again about it. She was wondering what happened to the Bollingers and the police officer. A wailing, buzzing, clacking sound came from the other end of the phone, so loud and so sudden that Karla threw her phone away from her. It sailed a few feet down the hallway, bounced off the wall, and landed in front of the bathroom door. Now the phone was drowning incredibly loud, the sound of wasps and hornets penetrating the air by the thousands while Tommy screamed over and over again. The water was still running. Karla managed to get both kids out of the bath and into their beds. Molly was on a strict no-dessert diet for the rest of the week. Still, she loved the feeling of them cuddled up against her for story time. Tommy was clingy, like he was becoming, but she reminded herself again it was a phase. Even Molly, too, tonight, maybe because she was in trouble, seemed to have trouble letting her go. "No," she had cried when Karla had finished her story. "Stay with us, stay here." Tommy had echoed her all the way until Karla had kissed them goodnight and closed the door. Then the house was silence. She took her laptop into the bedroom with her and tried to muster up the strength to work. When she couldn't, she thought of calling Becca back. But when she held the phone in her hand, it felt too heavy somehow. And then she realized she didn't want to talk to Rebecca. She wished Frank would come to bed. She was tired, and fucking angry that her husband treated her like some 1950s housewife. Kids, food, sex, sleep. She felt like a servant, like a machine. She turned out the lights and put on the TV instead. The sound of the door opening woke her up enough to vaguely be aware of Frank crossing the room and climbing into bed with her. His silhouette was dark against the glow of the TV. Frank pushed the remote in the dark, and the TV shut off, pitch black enveloping them as he slid under the covers. She waited a moment, her eyes adjusting to the dark, still waking. Long day. His voice came eventually. He sounded tired, his voice groggy and all static. Karla. Karla lay there, still coming to herself. She was remembering her day, remembering what had happened with the kids, the park, the neighbors. Where were you? She asked. He mumbled something, but she didn't catch it. Karla rolled onto her side, looking across the sheets to the other figure with her. His back was turned to her, an indistinguished black lump in the dark bedroom. What? She asked, both a response and a statement its own. Were you just home all day? It's Saturday. What were you working on? There was another long pause. They're coming home, he said. What? They're coming home, Karla. And he inched backwards slightly, closer to her. He didn't turn around. He just wiggled his frame slightly, shuffling closer under the sheets. Back first. Karla thought of an oversized caterpillar inching its way toward her in the dark. Who is? She asked, her breath feeling tight in her chest. Soon. They're going to come home soon, he said, wiggling, inching closer. Then somehow he was holding her. He had never turned around, never rolled over to face her and extend his arms. Just wiggled and twitched over until his arms wrapped around her and pulled her in close. Something was making a clanging sound, and there was the droning. It wasn't quite day yet. She could tell that much from where she was laying, but it wasn't night anymore either. Frank was gone, his spot on the bed still warm. Thunk. The sound came again. Karla was struggling to remember what had happened. She was in bed. She pushed over to her side. There was a noise. Thunk. How long had that been going on? She sat up. Thunk. It was coming from the window, from behind the blinds. Karla rose, her legs shaking a little, as she went over to the drawstring and pulled it. A bird, large, brown, fluttered against the window. Thunk. It struck the glass hard, then flew back and struck it again. Thunk. It's an owl, she had time to realize. Amazement, then realization and dread crept in. She remembered the dead owl outside the window. This window when she first arrived. It flew back slightly, lining up another run at the glass. The humming in her ear felt like bugs, like ants and bees and flies buzzing and crawling and flying around the sides of her head and neck. There was a light in the sky then. Karla caught sight of it as the owl hovered around, then back down. Thunk. Something in the sky she saw. It was a white blue light, a series of them arranged in a triangle shape. Then it began to turn slowly. The owl flew back around, higher this time, while Karla watched the lights rotate and then shift form, becoming wider. It was one object. There were no stars between the lights. Just black against the sky. The owl landed into the glass hard enough to shake it from the inside. It flew straight at Karla, collided hard with the glass, then fell to the ground. The force of it made Karla jump and step back. Her eyes went to the sky again and saw nothing, except the stars and the rising turquoise hue on the eastern horizon. Karla pressed her face to the glass and looked down. The owl lay motionless beneath the hedges outside. One wing flapped once, twice, then went still. She stood still, frozen, watching like that for a long time. Her breath warm, fogged up against the glass. The milky stain spreading across the glass downward, until eventually she couldn't see the owl. Karla thought about wiping it away, then about writing something in the glass like she used to when she was a girl, and would step out of the shower. The mirror would be covered in steam then. Across the house, she could hear Molly and Tommy bumbling around. Karla looked back at the smear on the outside of the window. A feather was stuck there.